Hi everyone, this is Britt Simon. Uh, DV2022 is ending. It'll be ending in a few hours. It's already past midnight in some countries in Asia, and it's already 1st of October, which means officially that in those countries you could say that DV2023 is starting. But DV2022 is having an interesting and exciting day. So I have to firstly mention, I'm sure he's probably not here yet, but I have to firstly mention a gentleman by the name of AM. Let me show you my screen here. I have to. I don't know why, but I have to do these things. So this is a live view of what's happening. So this guy, I did not get a 2NL, but at least Simon will mention me in a video something good I can get from 2022. It's sort of sad but funny, but not funny in a way. But anyway, AM, I'm sorry you didn't get a. I'm sorry you didn't get your chance. That sucks. But anyway, at least you've been mentioned. So let's talk about what's going on. It's really weird. Yesterday, we know that the government had issued, and we add up some numbers. So I published a number yesterday of 54,728, I think it was. Roughly 100 short of the perceived cap for this year. So let's just talk about the caps for a start. Firstly, the government or the law says that there should be a cap of 55,000 visas available to DV lottery in any year. They refer to that cap in the instructions. It's widely known. It's written in the law. I mean, there's no doubt that that is the cap, right? And then they reduced that number to 54,850 this year in DV 2022 because of a program called NACARA. NACARA was an old program introduced in the late 90s, and there was an allowance of the DV visas put to one side to be used by NACARA if NACARA needed those visas. The reality is, as time goes on, the people who are eligible for the certain type of NACARA visa that would be counted against those that allotment has reduced to almost nothing. And so several years ago, they were allocating 5,000 of the visas towards NACARA, but in several years we saw them eat into that 5,000 allowance and actually issue something like 52,000, 52,700, something like that. So in a year when the available visas should have been 50,000, they were able to eat into that 5,000 allowance. So I expected yesterday, as we saw the high numbers, I thought, okay, it's within 100 numbers or so of the 54,850. I think it's likely, therefore, that they're going to use up some of those visas in that last 150 before the 55,000. But it seems like the government had different plans. Now, let me show you this. Show you the screen. Hang on one second. Let's put that back in. Okay, so this is Frank has just scraped the data this morning, and he shows 54,003 visas being issued. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Good. Right. So 54,003 visas being issued, 131 visas in AP. Now, this AP is administrative processing, which we know, Curtis, to be 131 cases where the visas are being printed. There is a tiny, tiny number of those cases that don't get printed, or they become issued. But we're talking about a less than 1%, right? So historically. Zarthisius has proved that number. So it should be absolutely clear to anyone with an IQ over 75 that that this 131 visas are that are in AP are being printed. It's more than actively trying to issue. It's literally they've asked for the visa to be printed. That can't happen unless the visa is allocated. And so in reality, we add these two numbers together, 54,003 and 131. And then on top of that, we have to add in also the visas that are used by USCIS, which as of September 18th stood at 1,346 visas. And the statement that that was made by the government on that. Hang on, let me just show you that because I just put that on. Yeah, I put that on Twitter because I wanted to make clear why I'm saying the 1346. Let me bring that over. Okay, now that's this statement comes from a declaration that came in one of the lawsuits, and it says, as of September 18th, USCIS reported to the department, blah, 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 meaning USCIS has granted 1,346 diversity visa applicants, principal applicants and their derivatives for adjustment of status. Adjustment of status is cases where the people are living in America on some non-immigrant visa, and so they go to a field office and they adjust their status from non-immigrant to their DV related immigrant visa status, LPR. They immediately become an LPR that way, right? So as of 12 days ago, there were 1,346, and I know for a fact that there have been people since the 18th that have been issued. So we widely have assumed that that number is about 1,400. Well, if that number is 1,400, right, and we've got just over 54,000 there and 131 being printed, then the government have issued 55,500 visas. And it's still sort of business time in some countries. So there's a possibility that a few more could be issued even as we speak. And this extract of data is about 2 hours old now, maybe an hour and a half old. So I don't know what the hell's going on. I told someone that if I was to do a live session, there would probably be a lot of swearing. So I'm just lost for words, really. I don't think the government know what the hell they're doing anymore. Now, a couple of things that I've got to say, right? Firstly, there's a guy called Marek Schiffer, right? He told me, and I disagreed with him, that the government had found some way to be super efficient in the reallocation of visas in the final days of DV2022. Super efficient in that, his assumption, which let me just save the punchline. His assumption was that they found some way of reclaiming visas that were that were refused in September. My point had been that if a guy goes along with a visa interview booked on the 30th of September and gets refused, that there's no time to reallocate that visa unless the embassy itself could reallocate that visa to another case, right? What I said there was no time to do is to pass that back to KCC for them to centrally redistribute that visa to some other embassy. That's what I said wasn't possible. Now, Marek, and the evidence for that, as far as Marek and I had agreed, was that if they could get within about 100 or so of the 54,850, I thought that would be pretty compelling evidence, and he thought so. And we kind of agreed in a friendly way that would be compelling evidence that he was correct, that they had got so close to the number that they couldn't have done that without some sort of redistribution from embassy to embassy, or from embassy to KCC, from KCC to another embassy. maybe that's happened, or maybe the government have just lost their freaking minds and they have no idea what they're doing now. And I'm just lost for words, really. I don't know what they're doing. So that's the first thing. And so on that one, Marek might be right. And I was certainly wrong, because I absolutely felt like there was no way they could get that close to the number because of the natural inefficiency. So that's one thing, right? So that's an example, by the way, of me being wrong and someone else being right. It happens, right? It does happen. Here, I'm going to give you another example of that. Raphael and I were having a mini argument the other day in a Telegram channel, and Raphael said, well, Raphael didn't exactly say, but he suggested that they might go over the 55,000 cap, and I said, no, that won't happen, right? Because I've read the law. I think the government have argued for many years there's a cap. Now I know about the early 90s. Difficulties with the cap, where they did exceed the cap by like 50, I think it was 58 cases in one year and 27 in another. I mean, it's relatively minor, but you have to understand, in the early days of the lottery, everything was paper based. I mean, in the very first version of the lottery, people were allowed to make multiple entries. My brother made 50 entries, right, in the very first versions of the lottery. Because people were allowed to do that, and it was all paper-based, right? We're talking early 90s versions of the DV lottery. One famous case, the guy had a party at his house, got tons of people round to his house, and they were all filling out applications for him on paper and sending them into the government so that he would be picked at least once. And I think he sent in about 500 applications for one person, right? Now, that was in a paper-based system, and in those very early days, multiple entries were technically allowed because they just literally had a different view. When DV proper started, and the first DV was in 1995, some of that chaos had been removed. They actually made a rule that you could only have one entry per person. That was part of the law that was introduced for the introduction of what we now know as the DV lottery. But it was still largely paper-based. So there was lots of natural inefficiencies and chaos going on. And for them to hit the number precisely, or to keep control of the number under 55,000, was obviously fairly difficult. When someone turns up at the interview and there's an extra baby that wasn't mentioned on the paper in the papers, but maybe a CEO says, oh, never mind, we'll just give you an extra visa. The CEOs around the world were doing some things that didn't allow proper control in the early days. Okay, so the 1990s, frankly, has got nothing to do with how this should operate in a digital age. The fact that they've allowed this to go over 55,000 in a digital age is a big surprise to me. So, Raphael, if you're listening, you were correct. Your colleague and I may have a little bit of a legal issue shortly. That's another subject, but we'll see. But Raphael, you were correct about something, and I think that's probably a first, that you have been correct and I was incorrect. But anyway, congratulations for that. So there you go. That's Raphael. So there you go. So it's been a day of surprises. And I think the surprises are going to continue, but there'll be more interesting and more positive ones. We'll have to see. I certainly hope so. Let me just change this view. So anyway, so as you can see, there's some chaos going on, and the next few hours will probably bring in a little bit more chaos. Now, the next question becomes, if they have issued 55,500 visas, what will happen to those extra 500? Or, is there any chance they could revoke cases? Now, I've kind of given up guessing. I've kind of given up guessing things because who the hell knows what they're going to do next, right? So I think Curtis has a saying which he calls Curtis's law or something like this, that if you have a visa in your hand, you run to the airport. And Charles Cook has said the same thing. So, you get your ass to the airport and you fly and you enter the USA with that visa that you got in your hand. If I was sitting there with a visa that I'd just been given over the last few days, right? If you've picked it up or if you've received your visa and you have it, and you get an email or a phone call from the embassy and they ask you to come to the embassy, I don't think I would go. I would literally not go to the embassy in that case, because I would not want to take my passport with a visa in it to the embassy and give them control of my life. I wouldn't do that. I would get on a plane. That's what I would do, right? I would ignore the email. I would ignore the phone call. I would not go to the embassy, and I would say, see you later, and I'd be off to the airport. That's exactly what I would do, right? Now, is it likely that they'll start revoking visas? I don't think so. I don't think they will. I think because they will have made a mistake. I think there's probably some sort of protection in law, and I've reached out to a couple of the lawyers and asked. I think there's probably some sort of formal protection in law that the mistake that benefits an applicant should be allowed to stay that way, but I'm not certain, right? And so just be a little bit cautious is all I'll say. And if necessary, use Curtis's law or Chuck's advice to run to the airport and get your ass over here. And don't forget, you can always enter the USA and turn back around and leave, right? Although I've been told off for saying this morning, apparently. What the hell? So without wanting to give anybody legal advice that I shouldn't do, oh, Jesus. It is possible for someone to enter the USA and leave on a plane, 5 minutes later. After going through immigration, they can go stay at the airport. They go straight to another plane and leave the country. Right? There is no minimum period of staying once you've entered into the USA and activated your LPR status. So you can treat the first visit to the USA as an activation trip, and many people do that, right? And so then you can go home to your home country and take some time to organize your life and do those things. Now, I know that in many countries, the idea of just jumping on a plane and flying here and flying there and flying to one country and flying back to another country, it sounds ridiculous, right? Because of the price of tickets and everything else. But understand that, if you have a green card and you start earning money in America, your perspective about money is going to be different, right? You're not talking about Kenyan typical wages anymore. You're talking about what you'll be earning as an American, right? So, things will be a little bit different. You need to think in that mindset. So, so think that way. Anyway, let me see if I got some questions here. London Bridges, hey big boy. Well, hey big boy to you. Yeah, okay, that's great. Curtis, is that you? Is that you pretending to be London Bridges? Curtis, come on, come out the woodwork. I cracked myself up. Okay, so on my applying, I had no instruction taking about photo. I don't know what that means. There is, if you're talking about entering DV2024, for example, there's a full document that explains on a web page that's provided by the government explaining how to take the photo, what sort of photos are valid, and that sort of thing. So, so there's no excuse to not know about how to take a photo. Can you ask a couple of questions? Absolutely, you can, Bezier. You just did, in fact. It's a shame you didn't just answer the question. When do we upload photos? Well, you upload the photos as part of the entry process. Curtis says, London Bridges says, I'm not Curtis. I'm not sure if I believe you. But anyway, we'll see. If Curtis was to come on at the same time when London Bridges is on, then that would make me a bit more comfortable. I'm really just in too silly a mood for this. What problem do I have with Curtis? Well, ask Curtis. How much time does it take to process the DS260 if I submit in July 2022? Okay, so the DS260s get processed at different times, right? Different cases have different speed of processing. Now, in general, they open earlier submissions first, but just because they open them doesn't mean they can process them quickly, right? So you may have submitted in May, for example, and you may not be processed yet. There are other people who submitted in June who have been processed, right? And so whilst there are still some people who submitted in May and haven't been processed yet. So you submitted in July. It may be a fast processing or a slow processing. I don't know. I don't know anything about your case, right? So you have to just be a little bit patient. But what I would say is that by December, everyone's going to stop talking about when did you submit your DS260, because it will become obvious to people that everybody is going to have their DS260 processed in plenty of time. That is not going to be the problem. So the stressing and the over discussing and the total the total focus on DS submission date is going to disappear again, because just as it was in previous years, and nobody ever discussed this. This was a very simple thing. There was always a bit of a backlog at the beginning of the year, from about October to December. Maybe it would go into January, but by January and February, you would submit your DS260, and 2 weeks later you're fully processed and you got scheduled straight away. It was like that, right? In DV18 and before. In DV19, they introduced the document procedure and screwed that whole thing up, right? And it became a bloody nightmare. And then DV2020 and 2021 came along, and they were a nightmare for different reasons. But they also had the document procedure, which caused problems, right? But without the document procedure, the government have more than enough capacity to process all of the DS260s. And they actually, through declarations, we know that they've processed 103,000 DS260s for DV2022. So that is not going to be the decision point about whether you get an interview or not. It's not going to be about your DS submission date. It's going to be about your case number. Okay, that is going to be the more important factor as to whether you get an interview or not, which is how it's supposed to be run. Okay, it's supposed to work like that. It's supposed to be working around case number. And all the frustration the lawyers had with trying to force the government to operate on a case number basis, that was really just a reflection of how screwed up DV 2022 was, because case number should be more important than it was in DV 2022. But in DV 2023, case number is going to be important. Okay, so please understand that. Okay. Another good question here. Do family members take their visa from 55,000? EBM said it's counted as one. Oh, God, he didn't, did he? These bloody YouTubers. Ernest, what are you doing? It's not one. I know there's some dopey woman, what's her name? Pasan Nivasa in Sri Lanka who says it's one. She's an idiot and shouldn't be talking about DV lottery, right? She cleans houses and she does a lovely job of that, but she shouldn't be talking about DV lottery. EBM, bless him, he knows a little bit better. I don't know why he's saying this crazy stuff right now, if that's what he's saying. The reality is, if you're a family of 5, you take 5 visas out of the 55,000. That's what's happened, right? That's how it works, and there's no doubt, absolutely no doubt about that, right? So I don't know why EBM is saying that. There's another crazy lady who's just got herself a YouTube channel, Nafula, something or other, and I watched, I'm not kidding you, I watched 3 minutes of a video that somebody referred me to, 3 minutes of her video about how to enter the DV lottery. And in those 3 minutes, she made 3 such terrifyingly bad mistakes. At least one would guarantee your disqualification, and the other 2 are likely to cause you problems, possibly cause disqualification. And, she's talking complete shit about about something she knows nothing about, even though she was a previous DV lottery winner. it doesn't mean that she knows anything about how it works. So you guys watching some of these YouTubers that talk nonsense, you're putting yourselves in harm's way because they're giving you such bad advice that you're going to get disqualified if you listen to their stupid advice sometimes. Right? It's literally like that. This Nafula woman said, and she's a lovely woman. She's beautiful woman, lovely spoken woman. In any other circumstances, she'd be my best buddy. But when she sits there and tells you to choose chargeability based on your nationality, based on the citizenship that you currently hold, which is guaranteed to get you disqualified in the example she gave you, guaranteed, then I'm sorry, I've got no time for her at all when it comes to having a YouTube channel and talking about DV lottery. She shouldn't be talking, right? So, Nafula, I love you lots, but shut the hell up, right? I'm saying that to a lot of people today. So EBM is incorrect on this point. Oh God, I'm fired up today. Oh dear. All right, 2023 AF23K. I'm moving to the UK in March. UK is a great country, just bloody awful weather. Can I change my address now in the DS to get an appointment in London in case my number gets current about that time? Thanks in advance. Oh, your AF23K. The timing is going to be the problem there, right? So in March, when you move, how are you going to do this? Let me just think about this. So the thing is, I don't really know for sure when your number is going to be current, and your timing is going to be weird, right? It's kind of bad timing. I mean, it's just the timing is going to be wrong at that time. I think what's going to happen is you may even end up doing an embassy to embassy transfer in March or April. And they may schedule you based on your other address. I don't really want you to lie to the government in terms of here's my new address in the UK. I don't really want to advise you to do that because it's not a good idea to lie to the US government on an immigration application, right? So I don't really want you to change your address until you actually have moved, right? So you're going to have to handle that later, and that might mean that you get scheduled wherever you live now, and that you then have an inter-embassy transfer from one embassy to the other if it turns out that you have to move. Now that's okay, it does happen, and they will do that, and it's early enough in the year that you shouldn't have any problems doing that. But no, I don't recommend you incorrectly adjust your address. Okay. Is there any replacement to present instead of a marriage certificate? Well, if you're trying to prove that you're married, then a marriage certificate is better than a certificate of achievement for swimming 100 meters, right? I mean, I don't know what you mean, really. If you're trying to prove you're married, then a marriage certificate is the only thing. Maybe there's some different name for it in different countries, but I don't know what you could possibly mean there, Emil. What do you expect for the final decision for good luck? I don't know. I'm more than 50%. Like if I had to say, do I think it's going to be between 0 and 100%? I don't think we're at 100% certainty that we win the appeals, but I think we're over 50%. I think we're in good shape, but who knows? Even if I was 99% certain, that 1% could be what happens, right? So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. And I don't think we're going to get an answer on that until maybe December or January or later. There's no specific time when the appeals court panel have to produce their decision by. So it's likely to take months. On birth city, what do we feel here? Because in Kenya, some of us were born in the village. I know, and this was why I was drawn to Nafula's dopey video, because another thing she said was, if you don't know the city that you were born in, if you were born in a place that isn't one of those cities, she said something like, click unknown for birth city. Why the heck would anyone do that? You know the name of the village where you're born, right? okay, enter the name of the village where you're born. Now, if you would prefer that, if that village belongs within a district or within, is sort of located close to or within a city, you can say that too. But if you were born in the village, give that village name. Okay. Now, if you were born on the back of a camel and the camel was moving somewhere, then obviously I understand that's a little bit different, right? But you say you were born in a village, well, say that village name. The only thing you're trying to establish is that the name that you give on the as your place of birth, that should match what it says in your birth certificate. So have a look at your birth certificate if you like, which seems like a more sensible suggestion than clicking the button that says you don't know, which is a stupid suggestion. So have a look at your birth certificate, and if it says you're born in a city, don't make life difficult for yourself. Just say that city name and use that on your entry. Okay, that's what I would do. I would not be clicking that I don't know thing unless I really didn't know because I was on the back of a bloody camel. That's the only reason you should be clicking that I don't know button. If you know. Oh dear. What is the duration of validity for papers needed for the interview? Most paperwork lasts pretty much forever. In some countries, there are specific things that you have to renew. So, for example, I'm 57 years old, 58 years old. So my birth certificate is 58 years old, right? It's still valid. It was used in my recent immigration process to get my DV lottery green card and then to get my citizenship, right? It's still valid. My birth certificate comes from the UK, and so that's the law in the UK. You may come from a different place where they say somehow you have to get a new birth certificate or a new document, for whatever document that is. Maybe you need to get something more up to date. I don't know. You need to know the rules and the laws in your country. And the way you find that out is by checking out the reciprocity page, which is shown if you read the instructions. It takes you to a reciprocity page, and there you can look up the rules and the regulations for any country, and so that's how you know what you should be doing. The exception to this is police certificates in general. Now, there may be countries where a police certificate is issued, and on the top or somewhere on the police certificate it says validity 3 months or something like that, right? But the US government accepts police certificates, even if it's got the validity showing as 3 months or 6 months. The US government will accept that police certificate up to 2 years, 2 years old. Okay. So, and there are certain circumstances where you were previously in a country and you've not been back to that country, but maybe the police certificate is 5 years old, you could possibly still use that 5-year-old certificate. That would be okay. That would be acceptable. Although personally, I would try and renew that certificate if I could. But you can. So there are on police certificates there are some certain rules, and on other documents it varies by country. Okay. Let me see if I can talk about DV2022 case. What's the earliest DV 2023 interview date that I've seen? I don't know. Some Arab countries, for example, have a different weekend than the Western world, so they may be starting interviews as soon as Sunday, I would have thought. But I haven't heard of any specifically that are scheduled for Sunday. But I'm sure there are some. It can, if today was falling midweek, then interviews would be starting tomorrow in a normal year. That's how it works. It starts on the 1st of October. Ronald Chris says, thanks for the work I do. Thank you. How can I get a host? Says Ronald. Well, a host should be, so Western European, American people don't really think of this host system. The host system is more sort of common and commonly used in African countries. And so I'm not really the best expert to say how you would obtain a host. You would find a host. There are ways that I think African people who use that sort of system would would find their hosts. I'm not sure, what that would, how that would be. So, it's probably best discussed amongst your countrymen, and you'll probably find that there are some people who know other people who are prepared to be a host in America for you, with whatever arrangements. Just be a little bit careful of whatever arrangements and agreements you make with that host, that it's fair and that you know what you're getting into. Just be careful with that a little bit. Okay. We're a family of 5 with 3 children. 4 of us got the visa. Unfortunately, my wife was put under AP. Still no positive response. Please advise how I can handle the situation. It's a great question. So I would have hoped that the government would have resolved most of those cases today. And so maybe they have, and maybe you've got some good news coming, and you might see an update in SEAC about that. But if you have got your visa, you're obviously the principal applicant, and your kids have got the visa, then all of you need to travel within 6 months, right? And activate your visas, and you should do that. Then you have to figure out how you're going to bring your wife. Now, you can sponsor your wife if you don't get your visa through the DV process. You can sponsor your wife through an I-130 process, right, which is family-based immigration. The problem is it takes time, and so you need to speak to a lawyer probably to find out the most efficient way to file, whether you have to be in the USA in order to file and support her application, exactly how to do that. It's probably going to mean some period of time when your family will be apart from each other, but in time you'll be able to reunite and be in the USA. So assuming there's nothing terrible about that stopped your wife from being issued, then you should be able to resolve that given a bit more time in a non-DV process, right? So that's what you should do. I always recommend to people that are in that position where the embassy is saying, we can issue visas for you, but not for this person, not for the kid, not for the spouse or whatever. Always take the visas that you can get. And somehow it might be difficult. It might be very difficult for your family, but in time you can resolve that. Okay. So good luck with that. F2 visa was cancelled without prejudice. F1 visa was stamped in the passport. Has it ever been cancelled or revoked? Do you say no? Say yes, because it's better to be transparent. Now, I understand why you would say no. I understand that, because it was cancelled without prejudice. It's a very normal thing. Visas are cancelled without prejudice, and without prejudice means that you didn't do anything wrong, right? It hasn't prejudiced your your case, your relationship with the government in any way. But I would personally choose to say yes and explain, and the CEO is going to look at that and say, oh, well, thanks for telling us, but that's no big deal, right? But at least you've been transparent, at least you've been honest, even on the you've erred on the side of super honest and super transparency, disclosing something that you probably didn't need to disclose. But then how does that make the human feel sitting on the other side of the desk? He's going to think you're a more honest person, right? And that's why you do it, because you want to establish that you were trying to be as honest as you possibly could be. Okay. I see these little things sometimes. Oh, it's a sort of question. So this is from 20 Top Secure. My brother is finally here with me in the US in spite of Putin's stupidity. Thanks for all your help. That's fantastic. Putin right now, what an ass. Horrible thing he's doing to his country, to Ukraine. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives because of his stupidity. That man needs to go in a hole. In Russia right now, there are lots of people that keep falling out of windows randomly, and then the government says, oh yeah, that person was stabbed 17 times in the back, fell out a window, and then a piano fell on his head. Worst case of suicide we've ever seen, says the government, right? What a disgusting horrible person, what a disgusting, horrible government. Ugh, disgusting. There's no other way to put it. And Russia is making itself the mockery of the world. The whole world is turning its back on Russia over its stupid actions. And I hope Russians can see that and will take action against Putin. But anyway, to you, I'm glad you made it to the States and your brother made it to the States. Okay. Do you think someone with the case number 2023 AF18K will have the interview in Ghana? Is it likely for the person to get an interview considering how DV2022 was run? Look, I've kind of gone through this with other people, and there is a gentleman that I did a video about recently who's in Ghana. He's in a similar position, but his case number is a little bit higher than yours. The concern with all embassies was that in DV 2022 is whether they made enough capacity available, right? And on a month-to-month basis. Now, Ghana is the only embassy that I'm aware of that set its capacity so low, including in the last couple of months of the year, that they would not be able to process all of their cases if they had 12 months worth of that capacity. What do I mean by that? Let's say Embassy B, right, or Embassy A was scheduling 100 cases a month in the last couple of months of DV 2022. And because they only scheduled for 4 or 5 months of the year, they only did 400 or 500 interviews, right? And they only did 400 or 500 cases, which was horrible. It was dreadful. That was DV 2022 all over, and that cost a lot of people their visas. And in that you can count embassies like Addis, Cairo, and so on. However, I make those embassies a little bit different in my mind because I look at the last couple of months of their activity and say, in those last couple of months, the most recent couple of months, their capacity has been such that if they had a full 12 months of that pace, that would be enough to cover a decent number of people, and so that people shouldn't have to worry, even if they don't improve even further, even if they only stay at that pace, right? Now, Ghana is a different case. Ghana finished the year just as badly as it had been all year long, and finished on about a sort of finishing capacity of about 20 to 30 cases a month. Now, if they did 12 months of that, that would be a real problem. Okay, so for relatively low cases like yours, Regina, you're going to have to sort of watch what happens with Ghana. If you can find out how many interviews are happening. How can you find that out? Well, you could call a physician, make friends with someone at the physician, and find out how many people are going to the physicians to have DV lottery interviews. You could speak to people who are going to some of the DV lottery interviews in Ghana. They'll be starting next week, right? So we'll start to, I mean, some people have already been scheduled in Ghana. I just don't know how many people, right? And so when people start to go to interviews in Ghana, we'll start to get some feedback about, people will say, yeah, I was there and there were 4 or 5 other people, or there were 10 other people in there on the same day, and they only do interviews 3 days a week or something like that, right? So we'll start to get a little bit of feedback from localized information. We'll have that feedback in October and November. In January, we'll have the precise numbers, but I'm a little worried about low case numbers that become current. So people in DV 2022 will know that I'm worried about a thing called an AV queue. A queue of people in AV status who are locked into a certain embassy. I don't want that to happen to people in Ghana, but I don't think it's going to happen to people in Ghana because A, I think the embassy is going to increase capacity, and B, we should be able to find out if there's going to be a problem with Ghana early enough that we can tell people to start switching their cases. And at 18K, you should not become current before we have that information. That's kind of my thinking there, right? So my mind is on Ghana. I'll be looking at other embassies as well for similar sort of problems, but just make sure you subscribe to the channel, because if I see that happening, I'll start to send that information out that people in Ghana need to be switching their embassies if they can. But I don't think anybody needs to switch at this time. Okay, so I think you're going to be. I'm assuming you're going to be okay. All right. Sorry to divert on that fairly long, but there you go. Frank, thanks for running that extract this morning, Frank. That was interesting. Just before that, we had. Let me mention AM again. So AM had speculated that they're going to issue 56,000 or 57,000 visas, and I said to him, again, this is like the third time today, I think, or over the last couple of days, that I've had to eat my words. And I said, oh, that seems a bit optimistic. And then about half an hour or 45 minutes after that, you came along, Frank, and published the numbers showing that sure enough, they're at 54,000 plus AOS. We're at that point, they're over the 55,000 cap. So what a year. It's like, could they make it more of an interesting, wacky ride? I don't know. I also had another. I've been arguing with everybody recently. I'm sorry about that. I don't mean to, but people say stupid things. So what can I say? There was another guy, Turkish guy, I believe, who was telling me the other day that that it absolutely wasn't the lawsuits that caused this activity, this change of activity in DV2022. I mean, you've got to be brain dead, frankly, to think that way. The government in DV 2020 said, you know what, it doesn't matter if we only issue 10,000 visas. That's our right to do, right? We took him to court. They had to change. Judge Mehta changed that between September 4th and the end of September in DV 2020. They issued another 7,000 visas. We got up to about 20,000 visas. And then there was the reservation, right? That was the lawsuit that caused that. But the government didn't give a shit about wasting 40,000 visas, and all of a sudden the court told them they had to give a shit. Then in DV 2021, similar thing happened. They ignored everyone. They got sued again, and the lawsuits caused more activity, right? And then in DV 2022, they ignored everyone. They stopped processing between May and the end of September. They basically stopped all DS260 processing. They didn't schedule. They only scheduled in the first quarter of DV 2022. They only scheduled and issued 200 visas, something like that. It was nuts, right? They were clearly going along thinking, you know what? We'll just do the same thing we did in 2020 and 2021. Nobody can tell us to do anything. Sure, we lost a couple of lawsuits, but nobody can tell us to do anything. Then December 9th came around. They changed the strategy a bit, but it wasn't instantaneous that they started issuing a hell of a lot of cases. But then in January and February and March, we started to see, okay, they're starting to issue some cases. And I was saying, look, it's very, very clear they're going to issue 30,000, maybe 40,000, perhaps 45,000. And I remember telling Curtis very clearly that if they issue 45,000, I can't remember exactly how I said it, but if they issue 45,000, it would moot out his cases, his group lawsuits. I actually didn't recommend those group lawsuits, other than Husu and Preston, and I think I was positive about Bojabur, but those were earlier filed. But the cases filed later were filed at a time when it was becoming obvious that the government had changed their strategy a bit, and we're trying to do, maybe 40,000 plus 45,000, right? So I thought they were too late to file those cases. I didn't recommend anyone join those cases. But nevertheless, sometime in late May, the government just had a brain fart, right? Now, maybe that was because Curtis was filing. Who knows? I don't know. But I think what's likely is that someone at the government said, holy crap, guys, if we only issue 40,000 visas, we're going to get sued again. We're all going to be back in court. this is going to go on for another year. They're going to reserve visas, and so they went into maniac mode, and they scheduled 27,000 people to have interviews in August and September. This is nuts, right? I mean, completely unprecedented number of interviews taking place in August and September. Completely nuts, right? And they gave themselves the best chance possible of hitting the cap, or maybe even exceeding the cap. Now, do we think that happened because the government just decided to do that one morning? They got out of bed and they thought, "Oh, I know, we'll suddenly put the hammer down and we'll process all these cases, we'll schedule all these cases." Or is it more likely that they said, "You know what, we can't afford to be back in court over this one. We had better make damn sure that we issue as many visas as possible," right? And so that's a cumulative impact from all of the lawsuits from DV 2020 through to 2021 through to 2022. That's a cumulative impact. I've never claimed that any one particular lawsuit was the complete fix for all of it, but the constant barrage of lawsuits from all of the lawyers, was probably pretty depressing to the government. So much so that when the appeals court happened recently on September 16th, I remember Chuck Cook saying that the room was packed with government lawyers. I had something like 20, 25 lawyers there for the government, right? Now, do you know how much these lawyers cost to pay, right? They're expensive. They're very expensive. There's no way the government wants 25 lawyers back in court next year, or every year, because they get sued and lose. So they don't want that. They absolutely want to have these lawsuits go away. And I think now, Charles has said a couple of times he thinks litigation has fixed the DV program. I think that he may be right. Certainly it's stopped this short-term damage that we've been seeing. So I think he may be right. So anyway, Frank, thanks for all you've done this year. And yes, it's been absolutely freaking amazing. How is 2021? We have to wait for the appeals to come through. I've been looking for the video on cropping a passport photo, but I haven't found it. Is it possible for the link of that video? I can't find it right now, Nathan, but it is there. You'll notice my videos are organized by year. There's different folders for different years. So if I'm talking about DV 2022 or DV 2021, I try and put them in the folders. And then there's a FAQ section, which has, I think, about 70 visas, which are videos that I might have produced over the last 2 or 3 years or something, but they're worth looking at, right? If they're in the FAQ section, they're worth looking at, because many of them answer questions that are repeatedly asked. So go have another look, okay? I've only made about maybe 300 videos or something in my life, so it's not that hard. I mean, look at EBM. He makes a new bloody video every day sometimes. So he's got hundreds of videos, but you don't have to look through very many. Okay. Oh, this question's been coming up a lot. So the DS260 system, let me answer this question. The DS260 form has recently had the date changed at the top right-hand corner of the form. And it's got a lot of people freaking out because the date now says, I think, 10/31/2022. And so if you're a DV 2023 candidate, you might be freaking out because you're seeing this new date. And if you're a DV 2022 candidate, some of those people in DV 2022 have looked at that date and said, holy crap, the timeline is being extended. That's not what it means. What that date is about, it's a revision date for the form itself. There's also, just under there's a thing called burden. Burden is the amount of time, I think on the DS260, it's 155 minutes. And it's the amount of time that someone is expected to spend on filling out that form. You don't have to spend 155 minutes. It's just a rough estimate of how much time, how complicated that form is. And both the burden and the date are two important data points about the form itself that is controlled by an organization called the OMB, right? And there's a thing called the Paperwork Reduction Act, and basically every form is supposed to be, every government form that is controlled by the OMB has to be reviewed every once in a while, and so they put a date of the next time when it needs to be revised, and it has to be assessed in terms of the burden, the amount of time that it takes to fill in that form, okay? Because they're not supposed to make paperwork that is so out of date or so burdensome that it takes just hours and hours and hours to fill it out. They're not supposed to dissuade people from asking for immigration, for example, because they make the forms too complicated. That's all it is. It's got nothing to do with your specific case. It doesn't affect anybody in DV 2023 or 2022. Okay, it's just about the form, and you'll see that date will be revised, and you can see other government forms that have that date or various dates. Right, so it's nothing. Don't worry about it. But anyway, I thought I'd give you the full explanation. Okay. I'm trying to look for DV 2022 questions here because it is the last day and there's a whole year of processing for DV 2023. So I want to try and focus on the last day here for DV 2022. Tana entered yesterday from Cameroon in DC. Wish to meet you one day. Well, America's a very big country, right? So I often tell people that I don't really expect to meet many people. I have met some winners. I've had some lovely meetings with people. I've really enjoyed it. Love it. So if you're ever in California, I live just outside San Francisco. If you get over here, Tana, look me up. Seriously, I'd love to have a cup of tea with you. And maybe we can go and get some Cameroonian food or something. But yeah, congratulations, welcome to America, and make it the best life you can. Okay. Right. So this is a question that's important. People ask if they're in AP administrative processing, which the CX status says refused, but it has a longer description. It's actually technically it's the status of 221G, right? If you're in that case and your case doesn't get approved by the deadline, which is in a couple of hours' time in Ethiopia, just a few hours' time, right? If it doesn't get approved by then, it will never get approved. It will never change. Your chance is lost at that point. It cannot be approved later. The deadline is a hard deadline. I mean, none of these hard deadlines and hard caps and everything seem to count for anything anymore. But it is a hard deadline. Don't expect to be issued later. You're not going to get issued if you're not approved today. Okay, that's the reality, and it's a tough reality. But you may as well hear it straight. I'm sure you can find some bloody idiot YouTuber who will tell you something different, but it's not true, I'm afraid. Why some people not get a scheduled interview but send and submitted form DS260? The simple fact of the matter is they selected 119,000 people for 55,000 visas. And the 119,000 people, some of them then got busy and had babies, or they got married. And so that 119,000 number even grew, right? Now, the government processed 103,000 DS260s from that group of 119,000. So that means 16,000 people decided not even to submit their DS260 for whatever reason, right? But the government processed 103,000. That's still too many because they scheduled 72,000 people for interviews out of the 103,000. So in other words, 30,000 people never got an interview, even though they had their DS260 processed. But from the 72,000 people who did get scheduled for an interview, even though they refused some, they have now managed to issue more than 55,000. So unfortunately, although it sounds brutal, it sounds cruel, it's a numbers game, and it's like a funnel, right? You start with a very big number, 119,000. Then 16,000 don't proceed to the next phase. Then the government process 103,000. Then they schedule 72,000. Some 10,000 or whatever are rejected at the interview. Some don't even turn up for the interview. Some are placed on AP, on 221G. And in the end, we get 55,000 out the bottom of the funnel. That's how it works. It's like a big meat grinder, right? And the government say that unless they over-select, they wouldn't get enough visas coming out the bottom of the meat grinder, out the funnel. Now, when they select more than 100,000, it tends to upset people because that means that some people won't get their chance. If they select less than 100,000, everyone will get a chance for an interview, but they'll waste some visas. Okay, so that's that's the toss-up, and that's why sometimes they over-select. And what is supposed to happen is that the low case numbers are supposed to have their chance first in general, and that's supposed to be controlled by the visa bulletin. No other method is supposed to control that. It's supposed to be controlled by the visa bulletin. So we'll see how things go, but that's basically how it's supposed to work. DV2022 is completely crazy. What's the highest number of visa bulletin in this October of DV2023? Because last year it was the same for the previous month. Yeah, they repeated the visa bulletin. It was like a copy and paste. They just did the same numbers. It's the same. The numbers didn't change. That's all that meant. So the second visa bulletin that said 5,700, for example, for Africa, is the same as the first visa bulletin that said the same thing. That just means the number didn't change. Okay, I've done a video and explained why that happened. It was speculation at the time, but I now know that's why it happened, and it's actually a sign of a positive thing because it means they're processing DS260s fast, and that's a positive sign. So it's good. I already answered this question about your brother and Putin's stupid actions, so that's great. Okay. This is a follow-up on the question about the city of birth. In that case, your passport is incorrect, right? In what you're saying here, your passport has a different place of birth than what is said on your birth certificate. You should use the one that's on your birth certificate because that's the real document. That's the document that was probably produced at the time of your birth, but is a more accurate capturing. Now, in some cases, like if we imagine the city of London, for example, in London, there are various small towns and regions and areas which have their own names. So, Windsor, for example, or Southgate, or, Crystal Palace, or whatever, are all smaller towns that are within the area of Greater London, right? And so it's possible that if somebody was born in one of those smaller towns, Southgate, your birth certificate could say Southgate, but some other document could accurately say you were born in London, right? Now, so think about whether that difference in your passport and your birth certificate is an example of that. But if you have to decide between one or the other, go with the birth certificate, okay? Because that's the real document. And frankly, it may be that your passport needs to be corrected, but like I say, it depends whether the place in the birth certificate is actually a place that is within the area controlled by the city name in the passport. Did you get that? Okay. Quick question on DV2020 here. Yep, I know you're still waiting. We know that. We just have to wait for the appeal. It sucks. It shouldn't take this long. But, the fact that it is still ongoing is better than it not being ongoing, right? The lawyers, through their actions, have kept your chances alive to this point. And hopefully the appeal will win. We can't guarantee that, but hopefully it will win. And then you have a chance, right? But again, there's no certainties in this process. There's no guarantees. You just have to hope. Simon, good day. If I married a divorced woman, can I add her and her 2 kids to my application? Absolutely, you have to. If you're married, then that woman is your spouse, and you have to put her on your application. And the children are your stepchildren. And that's a legal status that the government of the United States recognizes. And they insist, they require you to list those kids on your application. Whether they're going to travel with you or not, whether they live with you or not, that's not the point. If you don't include those kids on your application, and the government find out that you've got those kids, the stepchildren, then they would disqualify you. 100% certain that you would be disqualified later for not including them. So yeah, you absolutely, in the DV 2024, you add your spouse and you add your stepchildren, whether they're living with you or not, whether you expect them to go with you. I got a message from someone this morning who said their kid is in school and they can't get a photo of them. Well, sorry, you may as well not enter the lottery if you can't get a photo. So find a way of getting a photo of those kids. Same thing for you. You've got to add them. Okay, very important. What's the highest number that's got a green card? I don't know. The data is available on Zarthisius' site. Maybe I've got that up. Let me see. I've got. I think I do. Yeah. Highest number in that's issued. That's how we want. Okay, issued. Let's filter there. Highest AF number with data from a couple of days ago is 63,886. Okay. Highest AS number is over 30,000. It's 31,033. Now, numbers do not necessarily match from year to year. Okay, so if you're asking that question because you want to know about your DV 2023 case number, you have to understand that the case number itself is not important. What's important is how many cases there are in front of you. Okay, and that's density. There are holes in front of every number. The holes are cases which were disqualified during the selection process and much earlier, before the results were announced. And so they're holes, right? So it'll go, you'll see case number 1 will be a real case number. Number 2 will be real. Number 3 is a hole. Number 4 is a hole. And so then number 5 is a real case number. So if you're case number 5, you might think you've got 4 cases in front of you when actually there's only 2. Okay. And the number of cases in front of you is what's more important. And that varies year to year. The density of cases, the number of holes, and the distribution of holes varies year to year. So you cannot necessarily say that case number 30,000 in 1 year is the same as case number 30,000 in the next year. Okay, you have to be careful about that. Don't make assumptions based on the case number, right? Okay. Let me scroll down. I'm going to try and take another couple of questions here. By the way, I have to say, thank you for that. That's a little donation. I appreciate that. I'll go get a cup of coffee on you. So thank you for that. That's sweet of you. Let's see. Oh, they're still setting. Second notification. Yeah, okay. So Ahmed, we know about the 13 that were sent yesterday. They were I think all Mumbai. September 30th is the last day. We were sort of chatting with a particular gentleman who got one of these 2NLs for Mumbai yesterday. Unfortunately, he was in Istanbul, and so I don't know if he's managed to get to. We were looking into flights for him, talking about chartering flights for him and all sorts of things yesterday. But he was sent a 2NL yesterday for Mumbai and given instructions on how to attend the medical, etc., for first thing in the morning. But so far, those 13 people have not been updated today, those cases. And so unless I'm missing something in the last hour while I've been live here, Unfortunately, that was for nothing. Those cases didn't have time to process, or or the people didn't get their information, or something. I don't know, but it does not signify that there's an extension in time. There is no extension in time. Okay. And is it all over for DV 2022? Yeah, pretty much is. It will be, certainly in a few hours' time. Over the next few hours, it'll be over for various countries as they hit midnight. But it's also over in terms of the number of visas issued. They're over 55,000 now. They shouldn't be issuing any more visas, but they are. So we'll have to see what the final number is. There is a chance that our SEAC data is not exactly accurate. There is a chance that something weird has happened, and maybe they're going to announce that they kept it to 55,000. But I suspect when we see the official numbers published, which won't be for some months, but when we see that, we'll probably see they went over 55,000. And that's, frankly, a mistake. But, it's a good mistake for us. How long can I apply for my husband to join me in the States when I arrive? You can file immediately. And I'm not a lawyer, and so I don't know the exact process for the I-130 process, and you need to either investigate that yourself or speak to a lawyer. But my understanding is you can file immediately. Once you're an LPR, you have to enter the country. You have to activate your status, but then you'll be able to file. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take a couple of last questions. Let me just see if there's any sort of regulars, or I'm looking for people who are regulars. If you're a regular viewer and you've got a quick question, enter it. I even repeat it right now, and I'll scroll down and have a look at those in a moment. And I'm just scrolling up to see if I've got a question here that if there's a question I can answer here now. Lots of very kind comments in the chat, so thank you very much for those. And some not so kind comments. You are really big. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I'm really big. Come here and tell me that. People are funny, the things they say. This is a good question. Do we need to apply for CSPA or call the US Embassy, or is it automatically when the DS-260 of the child is processed or during the interview? Daryl, I suggest you go on my blog, BritSimonSays.com, and there's a little magnifying glass search function where you can enter a search, some words to search, and enter the words child turning 21, right? And in there, you'll find a write-up. You could also look at the FAQ, and you'll get to that. So you'll find yourself to that same article. I've written a pretty important article for CSPA that interprets the law as it's supposed to apply to CSPA cases. It gives you a way of calculating the dates. When will they be eligible until? And you have to become current. Your number has to become current in time with the calculation for it to matter. Now, the embassies, I suspect, won't all know the law as well as we do. And so there is a memo linked in my article that is a government memo from, I think, 2013, where they explained how it was supposed to work. And it was supposed to be guidance for the COs. And you should print that out and take it to your interview, just in case the CO doesn't understand how things are supposed to work. Okay. So it's sort of, the law covers automatically, but whether the CO knows how the law is supposed to work or not is the question. And so for that scenario, you want to advocate for yourself. Okay. That's what I suggest you do. All right. Let's see. Can we do two I-134s at the same time? No, one I-134 is enough as long as it meets the requirements. If it meets the requirements, you don't need a second one. If you've got two people, neither of whom meet the requirements in terms of the amount of money they earn, then you've got two useless I-134s. What's the point of that? They don't add together, right? You've just got two useless ones. So one is all you need if it's good, if the person earns enough money. So there you go. Here we go. My family and I have our DV2023 in Johannesburg next week. Here we go. Awesome. That's probably the earliest I've actually heard of, but that's really, really cool. Johannesburg too. Now, Johannesburg just recently, by the way, Justin, have been using a form called the DS5535. You might want to look it up online because they've been using it fairly commonly. And it kind of extends the questions that are asked in the DS260. And if they ask you to fill out that form, it wouldn't be a bad thing for you to already have that form printed out and filled out, taken to the interview. So you can say, there you go. Now, if you have that form and they insist on processing it, it could delay your case for a little while, and it can take weeks or months for that to be processed. So the ideal thing is that you avoid being asked for that form by having a fully comprehensive DS260, all the questions completed, all the history of travel and education and home addresses and everything else, work history, fully completed, social media, all of that, right? And I believe, though I can't be certain, that if you have a fully completed DS260, it tends to reduce the chance that you'll be asked to fill out the DS5535. But you might still have to anyway. So good luck with that. I hope you don't get the DS5535. But if you do, it's not over. It just means it's going to take longer. Okay. Okay. I would like to take a picture with you. I need a DV2023 visa. Well, you don't want to put my ugly mug on a picture. So, you'll be fine. Take your own picture. Right. I am winner of 2022 from Afghanistan, which I shift my case to Pakistan. In inquiry email, my case is under process for interview, but meanwhile, after 30th September, it'll be done. Still any hope? Basically, no hope. If you haven't been interviewed already, Rashad, then you're not going to get interviewed. There's no hope of extension. DV 2022 ends, I think, what is it in Pakistan? It's like 12 hours ahead. It's 11 p.m. at night there, maybe 11:30 if they're on like India time. So it's over. I'm afraid if you've not been interviewed, it's over. All right. I'm just reading this one. Sounds a bit too wacky. Godfrey, I was talking about host systems earlier, but so there are often sort of rumors that get started, and sometimes people come out of an interview and they say sort of kind of untrue things, and it's not always that they meant to lie. It's just they don't really understand what just happened, right? So some people from Nairobi saying they were denied for being older than the host, right? Now, what's the sense in that? Number one, the host is not. It's not a part of the legal process, Now, it could be that they feel that the host is not a genuine offer, that they perhaps know something about the host or whatever else, but I think it's unlikely that they looked at the age and they decided something. People in Africa tend to make much more about age than Americans do. The average American lifespan is until 80 years old. In some parts of Africa, it's like 60 years old. So, it's perfectly natural for you to look at someone like me who's 58 and think, oh my God, he's really old. He's going to be dead next week. So maybe age, maybe you're more sensitive to age matters than Americans would be. But the decisions being made in Nairobi, are being made by Americans, and they are not really concerned about, a person being older than the host. It's not really what their concern is. So, it's probably just a rumor. Probably. Okay. I can't be 100% sure. Okay, we'll call that a day, I think. Oh, hang on. Let me see this one. I'm intrigued. Oh, last question then from Karine. DV2024, is it without the passport? Is that true? Yes, it's true. There's no passport requirement this year for DV2024 entry. The reason for that was they were blocked by a judge who decided that the government hadn't followed a certain process in order to change the rules and introduce a new requirement for the lottery. They should have gone through a process. And so the DV lottery rule that said you had to put in a passport was blocked in DV 2022. It's blocked for DV 2023, and the question won't even appear in DV 2024. They might introduce it for DV 2025, but they would have to do so at least 3 months before the lottery period. And so, we'll have to wait and see if they do that. But for DV 2024, it's definitely gone. Okay, that's the final question. It's already midnight in some of the countries. It's already over in some countries. And DV 2023 is beginning. So we'll have to wait and see what this comedy show brings in terms of the final number of visas issued. But I'm happy. I'm happy in this case that Raphael was right and I was wrong, if that's what turns out to be the case, because more people getting visas is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. So that's great. But just for those people who have been issued in the last few days, keep hold of those visas, would you? Right? And maybe make some early travel arrangements. All right, everybody. Thanks very much for joining me today. Thanks, Sam. Bye-bye.